As babysitters and caregivers become a greater part of a child's upbringing, all of we working moms seem to wonder if our children are being disciplined consistently. Dr. Janice Gibson joins us today. She's a psychologist, mother, and author of Discipline is Not a Dirty Word. And she has really talked to mothers all over the world and found that discipline is a universal problem. Dr. Gibson, thanks for joining us. It's a universal problem, and I think probably primary concern, especially for working moms. Do you think because our time is limited, we should even be more concerned about discipline than a mom who's home all the time?
Eileen, I think all mothers should be worried about discipline. But the problem is really not terribly different for working mothers than it is for any other mother. I think we just feel more guilty about it often because we know we're so busy.
It sounds like then our perceptions are off a bit.
Just a bit. If you look up the word discipline in the dictionary, I think you will be very surprised to note that discipline means to teach. What makes us effective teachers makes us good disciplinarians.
Well, I wonder about knowing the difference between bad behavior and seeking attention. If you're gone a lot because you're working, how do you know that your child just doesn't want to be a part of your life and isn't just trying to get your attention?
He may be. That may be what he's doing. You can tell if, in fact, whatever it is he's doing, he does immediately before you give him attention. And if you keep on giving him attention and he keeps doing it more, then that's a child I call an attention-starved kid.
Well, let's explain your position here, because the title of this book that you wrote, Discipline is Not a Dirty Word, seems as though you're an advocate for punishment. Now, is that what you mean?
Not quite.
What do you mean?
Not quite at all. Discipline means to teach. To be an effective teacher, you need to do a variety of things. Number one, you've got to be a very good model. Children learn by imitating. Number two, you've got to reward the behaviors you want to occur. And number three, you've got to give a lot of love and attention. I didn't mention punishment anywhere in that at all.
You didn't, but you mentioned a lot of love and attention. You also talk about quality versus quantity time. I don't know what quality time means. I'm never quite sure when I walk away that I've given that. How do you know?
You can know by the behavior of your child. If your child looks happy, you've given him or her an awful lot of quality of time. You can be a housewife and be cooking and be talking on the telephone or be watching the TV and not even notice your child at all. We did numbers of studies of mothers where we noted that in terms of actual eye contacts and verbal contacts, many mothers who are home 24 hours a day spend a total of 5 minutes interacting with their child.
So the idea is then to really focus on what your child is doing.
When you're with your child, particularly if there is limited time, make it valuable time. Use it to find out what he's doing. Use it to find out what he wants, what his interests are. Interact with him. Use it well.
I mentioned that this is a day of babysitters and caregivers. It's necessary. How do we make sure that that discipline that we feel is important is also carried out consistently by our caregiver?
That's always a difficult problem for a working mother, and I'm not going to sit on this show and tell you that being a working mother is easy. It isn't. You've got to know your babysitter just as well as you know yourself. You've got to find out who she is, what she believes, and what she does. And I advocate, if you're going to send your child to a daycare center, spend a lot of time there and find out exactly what's happening. A good babysitter needs to be the same good model, needs to be consistent just like you do, needs to be able to mete out an awful lot of reward for good behavior and the same good behaviors that you want, and needs to provide a lot of love and attention.
All right, if we're never punishing and we're only trying to show the right way, but the actions continue over and over and over again, and there's a lot of frustration added to our lives because we're not getting through, then what do? Give specific advice here on how to handle this.
Okay, you're talking about a mother who comes home from work. She's very tired, dinner has to be made, other things have to be done. She wants to do some preparation for her work the next day, and Johnny is throwing a tantrum. It would be very easy to punish. But I'm not advocating it because it isn't going to teach him how to behave. What do you want to do? Number one, you've got to realize a basic psychological principle there. Johnny is throwing the tantrum probably in order to get your attention because he hasn't seen you all day. Ignore the tantrum as long as you possibly can. Johnny is fighting with his brother. Separate him from his brother. Change the situation so he can't do what it is that you don't want him to do. I advocate separating kids when they're having a fight. If you don't have time to sit down and find out exactly what's going on, why the fight is taking place, and spend some time being an intermediary.
Before we jump to the next one, let's go back to punishment. You said that it's very easy to punish. Is that because it makes us feel that we've done something productive?
It gets rid of a lot of anger and tension we have. Punishment may help. It'll help you. It won't necessarily teach your child what it is you want your child to learn. And if you understand that, you won't get so frustrated yourself.
It occurs to me, is punishment a thoughtless kind of reaction? Is it something we've done in the past, so we do it again because it seems to be a natural reaction? Is it better to sit down and think it through? That just seems to be so much easier said than done.
It's much easier said than done, but yes, it's much better to think it through. And the mother who turns around and says, I'm going to spank you, because that's her first reaction, is very likely to say, how many times am I going to have to spank you before you learn? And the answer is 1,000,000 times, and maybe the child won't learn if you're not doing any of the other things that need to be done too.
What do I do instead of turning around and saying, I'm going to spank you 1,000,000 times? What do I do? Sit down and say, this isn't the right way to do this?
Sit down and say, this isn't the right way to do it. But, you know, the real issue here is that you have to reward the good behavior. We tend to focus all our attention on bad behavior when we talk about discipline, but we shouldn't. What we should do is remember we've got to reward the good behaviors. The child who behaves well, unfortunately, in America, is usually the child who gets ignored.
Oh, that is a good thought.
You're tired, you come home from work, and your child is sitting watching television or reading a book. He's not bothering anybody.
So you should reward him or her if that behavior is good. Reward him.
If that behavior is good.
The hard way. You say that it's time that kids started to learn some things the hard way. Now, what do you mean?
Very frequently, we tend to be very guilty. We're worried that we're working mothers. We don't want anybody to think our child is misbehaving because we're not paying enough attention. And he does something bad, so we do our best to hide it. Your child is a bit older and he starts cutting class at school, and the principal or the school counselor calls up and says, where is he? You lie for him because you don't want anybody to know what's going on. That's an easy thing to do. He gets off the hook, and what does he learn? He learns that anytime he wants to get off school,
you can rely on mom or dad to get him off the hook. So you're saying let him be suspended or expelled, and in the case of the younger child, let them stew a while over this problem?
Yeah. They have to learn how to deal with problems in the outside world, and nobody is going to be there to protect them every day.
All right, realistically, as you said earlier, being a working mom is not easy. How do we discipline ourselves so that we don't lose control when the frustration really is incredible? There is so much child abuse in our country now. How do we keep ourselves from getting out of hand?
Number one, take what I call a time out. Separate yourself from your child when you're so upset that you're afraid you might do something you don't want to do. Send the child off to another room until you both calm down and can sit down and have the time to look over the problem together, to work it out, and to come to a reasonable solution, because teaching always requires a reasonable solution. Hysteria never works.
All right, I thank you, Dr. Janice Gibson. It will remain a universal problem, but those are some answers we can count on. Thanks.